Hello and welcome to another Hero of Health talk. On this lovely channel, we are welcoming you to the community coaching and education that you need to help you prevent and even reverse chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, obesity, and so many more, so that everybody can become heroes of their own health. Today, we are talking about the unsung heroes who are taking care of our loved ones, patients, who are caring for them at times when it's most difficult. It can be through sickness and through health, of course. But today we are going to talk to Adam Clarke to talk about the incredible and harrowing story he has gone through with his incredible wife, Sarah Clarke, whose interview we have heard just 2 weeks ago, how they together as a family gone through terminal cancer. Thank you very much for joining us on Zoom. And if you join us on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button so that we can share and help everyone live a long and fulfilling life. Thank you very much for joining us, Adam, today. And thank you, Wendy, my co-host today, who is also a GP and a lifestyle medicine doctor, who is going to carry us through this beautiful interview.
Thank you, Linda. That's wonderful. And Adam, I thank you so much for coming and joining us today to share your story following your beautiful wife Sarah's terminal diagnosis of lung cancer at the age of 37. As Linda said, we spoke to Sarah, we interviewed Sarah on the 16th of October, and she ran through her story so wonderfully with us, emotional, obviously, and heartfelt, and sort of gave us all a real eye-opening experience as to what she and you guys have been through over these last 5 years. It was actually Sarah's idea to get you on board as well, and because she openly said, everybody sort of thinks about the person with cancer and how to support them, and often the person that is supporting, the closest person supporting them on their journey is kind of in the shadows and forgotten about a little bit. So she said how useful it would be for anyone listening, and also, for yourself and for Sarah to interview you as well. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this. And you shared with me just before coming on to interview today that, you'd actually finally plucked up the courage to watch Sarah's interview only 3 days ago. And I can only imagine the emotions that must have triggered in you. So from here, Adam, are you happy to share your story? I can leave you to kind of go through the story yourself, and we can, I can obviously sort of come up with any questions on the way. So feel free to take the spotlight.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Sarah, as well, for volunteering me for this. But yeah, you mentioned Sarah's interview. So yes, I did watch it a few days ago, and yes, it was pretty emotional. It's really interesting. Just it's in terms of Sarah's diagnosis, it was 5 years ago now. So a lot's happened during that time. So it brought back a lot of memories for me, both like really good things that happened, but also, really difficult times that we got through. And yes, you just can't believe, there was just so much, there's just so many different experiences as well. And yeah, there probably were a few tears from me as well as I watched it, hid away from the rest of the family and went through it.
I can just imagine. I mean, the feedback that we've had, a school mum the other day came up to me and just said, oh my goodness, I watched the interview with Sarah, and I turned it on to just watch a little bit over the afternoon, and I just found myself hooked, and I couldn't sort of, you know, tear myself away because of the emotions it triggers and the lessons we were all learning from it. So I can, just you sitting there and watching that, and like you said, you know, bringing back those memories that had actually kind of been filed a little bit, and also hearing that from your dear wife's perspective, that may or may not have been shared at the time when you were going through that horrendous ordeal. So if we go back to the very start, Adam, when obviously Sarah was fit and well and running the Sheffield Half Marathon, and then she developed this cough that didn't seem to be going away. And she went to her GP, and they obviously organised the chest X-ray. Could you sort of take us from there? Where were you with her when she got the result of that chest X-ray?
Yes, yeah. So we'd actually both done the Sheffield Half Marathon.
Oh, sorry, Adam. Again, sorry.
I'm just going to get some credit.
Good.
I'm only joking. But yes, I think, yeah. So it at the time we thought it was, we didn't know really what it was with Sarah. I think things like sarcoidosis had been mentioned as possibilities. So yes, they'd done some X-rays and they did a biopsy. And yeah, I remember it really vividly. We went to the Northern General, which is the local big hospital in Sheffield. And I probably knew it was going to be really bad because I had to drop Sarah off because I couldn't find anywhere to get parked. It's parking around there's horrendous. And I eventually got there about 5 minutes late into the appointment. And then Sarah turned to me and told me, "They've not told me anything yet. They're waiting for you." And I think, yes. And as soon as that, then it was like, oh my God, this is going to be really, really difficult. And yeah, when they said, it's lung cancer, the life expectancy is 12 to 18 months on average. We just couldn't believe it. They then ushered us into a little room where we just cried for a little while. But it was just unreal. And it took a little bit of time, but I think the thing thinking back on it now, it did change something for us, because up until then, you kind of had this vague image that we're going to grow older together and happier and, watch the kids grow up, and all of a sudden that's been taken away from you. That kind of, expected, life, how things are going to go. Somebody's told you, no, that's probably not going to happen. Sarah may die within the next 12 to 18 months. And we don't know, at that time, we had no idea what that period's going to look like. So yes, it was just, it was really difficult. I think both in terms of, caring for Sarah and feeling terrified for her in terms of, what's coming up and what we're going to have to get through. But also just, I think for me, it just changed, in terms of, I'd always seen myself as, living, forever with Sarah, growing older together, and just having that taken away and having to think about, how that could be different. And it took quite a lot of time to get my head around that at the time. So it was terrible. It just felt like the floor had fallen out beneath us. And but it was odd at the same time, because life carried on. So we were having an extension done on the house. So when we got home, had to make a bunch of decisions about where light fittings are going to go, and all of that kind of stuff, and then speak to the builders, etc. But it was just it was horrible. Although I did have a more positive experience, because that same doctor, we went to see her this summer, so that's 5 years later, and it was actually the same room that we went into, and that was just a bit of a checkup, because Sarah's had a few lung infection problems, but nothing too major. And yes, that was that was really weird. I think we both felt incredibly emotional going back into that room.
Was that the first time you'd been back into that very room? Goodness.
Yes, yeah. And even to see that doctor as well, because from there, the journey had been on to Weston Park initially, and then onto neurology and places like that. But yeah, we'd not been back to that original, where it all started, to Dr. Hill. So yeah, that was really weird, but good.
And then you said that you actually had a positive experience in that room this summer.
Yes, yeah, she was fab. She was really helpful with Sarah, but also I think she was just genuinely, really thrilled and really pleased to see us both.
Yeah.
And to see that Sarah was doing so well, after herself having to give her that news, 12 to 18 months earlier, say 5 years earlier.
5 years. Absolutely. And that's the thing, isn't it? You, at the time, that devastating blow that you received in that room, and goodness me, you entered that room late. Sarah was already in that room on her own. Was there a nurse in there as well, a cancer nurse? Yeah.
Yes. There was. I mean, and they were really helpful. I think one of the first things they did after giving us a bit of time was, they got us the forms for certain benefits that you could access.
Yeah.
Straight away. I mean, it's probably a little bit too soon. You didn't really know what was happening, but yes, there was a nurse there and explained that there'll be the follow-up, with Weston Park, etc.
But just going back to that room, to be sat in that room waiting for that diagnosis and presumably the cancer nurse had been introduced as well to Sarah before you arrived in that room, and then, like you said, Sarah said, they haven't told me anything yet. So that's kind of a warning shot. Warning shot.
Can you stop? Allahu Akbar.
Sorry about that. I think Linda will be on the case in terms of sorting that out. Sorry, Adam.
No.
Yeah, that's that kind of warning shot that there is something about to come your way that is not going to feel comfortable in any way. Do you remember the words that Dr. Hill used when she broke that bad news?
Probably not word for word, but it was along the lines of, I'm just terribly sorry.
Wait, what is this?
It's lung cancer. That's the diagnosis that you've got.
Yeah.
And I think it was tricky, because then we were asking, well, what does that mean? In terms of life expectancy and everything. And I think, and I think she found it quite difficult herself, in terms of she didn't. I think it was probably later that we got the 12 to 18 months, etc. when we went to, in terms of life expectancy, when we went to Weston Park. But yes, I don't think at first, she could answer many of those questions, because she wasn't an oncologist. She's the lung specialist, but she got that diagnosis. So it was just, she's just really, really sorry. It was really difficult.
And you said how you had some time to digest that information as much as you could at that time, and you had a cry together, and obviously you've got 2 young children. Were they at home? Were they at school? What was happening with them on that day?
So they were with the grandparents, Sarah's parents, who lived just down the road from us. So afterwards, we had to drive back to get the kids. But first off, we had to, see Sarah's parents, straight away afterwards. And that was really difficult. We took them away from the kids. We said, oh, can we, have a chat with you separately? And we had to break the news to them that, this massive shock that we'd had, that we expected to go along, some kind of lung condition, maybe, something that can be, looked after. But but completely, it was, just a massive shock for everybody. And obviously, they found that really difficult.
Absolutely. And, nobody was expecting that, were they? I mean, yourselves, particularly, nobody was expecting that diagnosis in a fit, young, healthy, non-smoking 37-year-old woman. And like you said, you had your image and your expectation was to live that long, healthy life together, which actually sometimes we totally take that for granted, don't we? And we don't actually have to even consciously think about that because we're together and that's just a given. But to suddenly be told, at whatever point down that line that it was 12 to 18 months and that's it. I just can't even imagine how you processed that.
No, it's just, it was just, it's just unbelievable. You just couldn't, it was just so unexpected. It was just so out of the blue. We just expected, as you do, you're young, fit, healthy, everything seems to be going quite well.
Yeah.
And to get that news, it just changed everything.
Absolutely.
Completely.
So can you share sort of how you did cope with that and sort of what happened after telling Sarah's parents?
So I think after telling Sarah's parents, it was I think for a little while, the first line of treatment that Sarah had was immunotherapy, which isn't that invasive. It's not that difficult treatment. She coped with it really well, and it was probably quite positive at first. We told the kids that Sarah was ill, that she had, but they were too young. They were 5 and 7 year olds, so they didn't really understand what cancer was and things like that at the time. So I think for that summer and a little bit of time, it was more, it felt a little bit unreal because, whilst Sarah still had a bit of a chest problem, she didn't feel horrendous. And so we probably had a little bit of a period where, it felt like, oh, well, maybe this isn't really happening. We'll just keep on going as we can. But then I think it was in the autumn time when I think things started to change and the immunotherapy, we found out that it didn't work. And so at that point, I think the first challenge that she had was she had fluid build up around the heart, and we had to get her into the Northern General at the time. But I remember that was quite tricky as well because, and it's something that cropped up quite a few times throughout the journey. It was actually it's fab that we had lots of different support. So you had Western Park. At the time we had the neurology people. At the time we had the heart people as well at Northern General. And at times, we've had the St. Luke's, the hospice care as well. But actually, when Sarah did fall ill, actually it was often, and she wouldn't be that communicative sometimes when she fell ill, actually understanding or trying to work out where to go was quite tricky.
Because there were so many different avenues that were involved as such. You didn't know which one to go down.
Yes, it's exactly that. And that was quite tricky because it'd usually be a time that's incredibly stressful, so Sarah's not well, trying to sort out the kids or maybe get them to the grandparents or to a friend's house. And so I could work out what to do with Sarah. And then you'd be trying to, ring around, different contacts that you've got. And it's fabulous that you've got those contacts, but at the same time, trying to work out, where was the best place for Sarah. Because I remember, I think that the local cancer hospital were a bit cross with me because I got her in there when she had the fluid build up around the heart, and they couldn't deal with that. So we had to get her off to the main hospital, the Northern General. But yes, I remember it was quite stressful and it was quite tricky, and that did crop up quite a few times. Just trying to work out, where do we go? Is it accident, an emergency? Is it the GP? Is it something else? And yeah, I think often I'd be the one trying to work that out, phoning around lots of different places.
Goodness me. And that feeling of responsibility and also the emotional connection that you've got with your wife, and also obviously you've got your children as well to be looking after, to try and then make these decisions, that are so difficult to make, and actually the medical field find it hard to make sometimes as to which would be the best route first. You're then taking that on yourself, and also very much in an emergency, a very urgent setting, isn't it? Because suddenly the fluid around the heart got to the point where it was affecting the heart's capacity to do its vital job, and that needed to be sorted out ASAP. So these are decisions that you're making, very quickly, plus having to look after the children as well.
Yes, having to balance that, and just trying to work out from your limited knowledge, because obviously Sarah she wants to get into the right place as quickly as we possibly can, and so yes, it felt like a lot of responsibility, and having to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. What support was offered to you from the hospitals or from the hospice? Was there support offered to you yourself?
Yes, so we did have the numbers, so you'd have numbers for people like the lung specialist nurses. We had numbers for different nurses and contacts on the neuro wards, and you'd have contacts at the St Luke's palliative care when we were in touch with them, and obviously the GP, etc. as well. But often, it's fine, it's getting in touch with the right person. But yes, there was support in terms of numbers that you could call and people that you could speak to, but because Sarah's she had multiple different issues at different times, working out it wasn't just one avenue that was your go to all of the time. It would change depending on what was happening.
Absolutely. It's as if you needed a PA or one contact that you would be able to reach out to then decipher that for you. But I can imagine just how difficult that was. And when Sarah shared her story about when she was at the yoga class and she'd started to not be able to use her arm and move her leg without looking at it, and she was driving home and suddenly realized that she couldn't change gear unless she looked at her hand, and when she got home she received this phone call to say from the GP to say that actually she'd had a scan earlier that day, and that she had a brain tumor, which was a metastasis, a spread from the lung cancer, and that she actually needed to go into hospital that afternoon for emergency surgery. And she described how she went over to her neighbour, and she'd also lost the ability to speak at this point. Suddenly that pressure in the brain had built up so much that it was affecting the functioning of the brain. And the GP was on the phone at the time, asking the neighbour whether they could contact you, and the dear neighbour, I think is Jane, isn't it? She was like, no, I can't. Can you speak to him? So you then received that call from Dr. Humphreys, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yes.
And how did you manage that?
I was at work at the time, so it was, I think I was actually in a one-to-one with somebody that I was managing, and I think I didn't actually have my phone with me at the time, so I think because people knew a bit about my situation, so somebody noticed that my phone was bouncing up and down on the desk quite a lot and brought it in, and yeah, again, it was a little bit like getting the initial diagnosis. It's like, oh gosh, what is this? You know, didn't really understand what it meant at the time. Didn't really understand that it was a metastasis from the, you know, from the lung cancer, etc. And it was just, yeah, it was just, I've got to get back to Sarah as quickly as I can. And I'd cycled in, and I knew that wouldn't be quick enough, so I managed to get somebody to give me a lift straight back up home, and managed to get there before the ambulance did, and just held Sarah, you know, until the ambulance came along. But yeah, she couldn't really speak, she couldn't really get her words out. But I think because she had the tumour came back about a month or two later. And I think that time Sarah did call me, but she couldn't speak. And I think all she could do was make ambulance noises like Nino, Nino on the phone. And so I was saying, oh, do you want me to phone an ambulance? Because she couldn't phone an ambulance because she couldn't speak. So yeah, it happened a couple of times where, well, you know, you're trying to sort these things out on the mobile phone. So managed to, you know, get her off the phone and bring the ambulance and get back twice. So yes, it happened twice, you know, in terms of, I think the second time, I think she was at home alone. And, you know, it's just got to get there and work with Fab, you know, it's just obviously, you know, it's an emergency, able to drop everything, get back, you know, hold her, look after her. You know, wait for the ambulance to come, you know, and see what happens next, you know, what they're going to tell us.
Goodness me, Adam, it's one thing, you know, sort of after the other, isn't it? You suddenly get another, like you said, another bit of bad news, and not really sure as to what the next part of the journey was going to look like, even though that journey was still very unclear, wasn't it? And you know, you were still working full time at this point?
Yes, I think up until when the brain tumour came back the second time, up until then, yes, I'd been working full time, worked in civil service. They'd been pretty, you know, they'd been really supportive, and you know, I think if I'd wanted to take time off, I needed to, then, you know, and occasionally with, you know, hospital appointments, treatments and things like that, I was quite lucky, you know, I'd get some flexibility to go along, but generally, yes, I was working full time at the time, you know, had a team of people spread around the country that I looked after and managed, and just, yeah, trying to balance that with Sarah and the kids, etc.
Goodness me. So you've gone from being a full-time working dad and husband, to suddenly being the carer of your wife, the carer of your children. Obviously, you know, you're obviously a dad, but more taking on more of that caring role, and also still managing to manage other people in your job. How did you look after you?
I think, being honest, I probably didn't always look after me. I think some of the time I'd just see a list of, you know, a bunch of things that I needed to get done each day. You know, you just see a big long list of jobs to get done, you know, in terms of looking after the kids, supporting them, giving them the time that they need, looking after Sarah, the house and work. And I think some of the time, yes, you know, especially when, you know, Sarah's fit, because, you know, she wasn't always feeling terrible, you know, it would ebb and flow depending on, you know, where we were at the time. But yeah, I think some of the time I probably didn't look after myself, and it was more, you know, putting everybody else's needs first. I think occasionally, though, you know, I did have a few support mechanisms. So I like to go out running, and I'd occasionally go out running with friends. You know, you'd have a bit of a chat as you're going around. That really helped. You know, play football occasionally with a group of friends, and maybe go to the pub afterwards. So I try and keep up, you know, those those kinds of things. And it wouldn't always be focusing, on how I felt or how Sarah was. It was just being, something that felt a little bit normal, and something that you could enjoy doing. And I think that kind of space away, and a bit of time for me, especially with running and things like that, I think I found it really therapeutic. You'd go out, you'd have a bit of time to yourself, and you'd kind of work things out. You'd come back feeling better after I'd done that. So yeah, I think probably running, going out, keeping up contact with people, really helped in terms of the more like day-to-day kind of support mechanisms for me.
Absolutely, bless you. And well, it's a massive therapy, isn't it? Running, exercise, meeting up with others, whether or not you, like you said, whether you talk about what's going on, talk about Sarah, talk about yourself, feelings and things like that, or whether you just sort of go out to escape and get some normality, just like you said, especially, coming from having, been a runner and doing the exercise and the Sheffield Half Marathon like you did before. So keeping that up, I can see how important that was. Did you feel that, sort of looking back, that people would often talk about Sarah and how Sarah is, and sort of understandably ask about her needs and how they can sort of support Sarah, rather than sort of asking about how you felt and if there was anything they could do to support you?
Yes, definitely. So I think at times when things were difficult, because lots of people would want to find out how Sarah was, I remember having to almost set up lines of communication to stop, especially if Sarah's in a hospital, agree that, oh, well, I'll speak to these people and get them to, pass on messages. So, there's lots of people, in some ways, really, really lucky, loads of people really care about us and it really looks after us. But at times, yes, it probably could get a little bit overwhelming because everybody wants to know, how Sarah's doing, how she's getting on, what's happening. So there was something about filtering a bit of that out. And yes, a lot of people would, think about Sarah and, I guess put themselves in, her shoes, or imagine themselves there, and, think, well, that's horrible, and obviously I do that myself as well. Thinking that, well, Sarah's going through something that's far more scary and far more difficult than what I've, got going on in my life at the moment. So yes, it was a lot about Sarah, but I think I'd also do that as well. I'd deflect, so if people did ask me how I was feeling and how I was doing, I probably would at times, turn the conversation quite quickly onto how Sarah is doing, what's happening there, rather than talking about myself. And I think, to be honest, part of the time, probably didn't know how I felt. Probably typical bloke that, I'm not always that great at talking about your emotions and how you feel. So yes, I think a lot of people would, but I think it's a bit easier as well, because I think talking about Sarah and cancer and, physical illness that people react, rather than talking about feelings, is probably a little bit easier for people, and probably was a bit easier for me as well at the time.
Absolutely, I can just imagine it's a hard place to go, isn't it? And you don't quite know where that journey is going to take you if you start to sort of become vulnerable and start to tap into those feelings. Did it hit you at any point, sort of sort of an awareness that actually you were kind of suppressing feelings or emotions? Yes,
I think at times I'd probably, if I was at home alone and say Sarah was in hospital, it hit me in different ways. So sometimes I'd probably just start crying and I wouldn't know why. The emotion would just come out. You'd be at home, manage to get the kids to get in bed. They might have been crying quite a lot because they're really upset. And then, yes, you might go downstairs and you wouldn't necessarily know why. but yeah, it just come out, you would just start crying. But I think it probably hit me the most in terms of working out how I felt and what I needed. Actually, probably when Sarah started to get better after the brain tumours. So that was a really, really difficult period, because we'd been told that Sarah only had a few weeks left to live at the time, and we'd gotten ourselves as ready as you can. We talked to the kids, about death and things like that. We'd even planned Sarah's funeral. We spoke to a celebrant about it. We talked, about what, my life after Sarah. So you'd got yourself, into that kind of space. And then, fantastically, it didn't happen. Sarah got better. And she kept on getting better as well. So it got to a stage where she didn't need the same level of support that I was giving her, because I had to, manage her medication, in terms of, do, everything around the house, etc., with the kids, etc. And I think that the thing that I really hit me and I really struggled with was probably when I lost that, more of having that kind of carer purpose, in that kind of, my job was looking after Sarah, looking after the kids. But then things were changing. Sarah's getting a lot better. Didn't need me looking after her, didn't need me managing the meds and things like that. And I probably felt a little bit lost, in terms of, and also probably a little bit frustrated as well, because I think it spent so long planning everything around what Sarah could and couldn't do, completely understandably as a family, in terms of what we'd do at weekends, which friends we'd see, how much energy Sarah had, so because we want to do things as a family, so it's a really big consideration. But then I think it got to a stage where we were still planning everything in terms of Sarah's preferences and what she wanted to do. And I think it was almost a bit subconsciously at first I started to get frustrated and thinking, actually, I really need to start to think about what I need and to get some balance, because it can't all be about Sarah. She's doing really well. She doesn't need that level of support, and doesn't need, all of the, social activities and everything else that we planned as a family to be built around her. And I did actually at that time seek some counselling, somebody to talk to, kind of a person who doesn't know me and Sarah, which was really helpful. And that really helped me, because I didn't know what I wanted or needed at the time. I didn't know, beyond being the person who, looked after Sarah and, looked after the kids and did what I needed to do. I didn't know what I needed. And actually having that bit of space and somebody completely different to talk about, to moan a little bit about Sarah too as well, was that really helped. And even just Sarah knowing that I was seeking counselling and going to speak to somebody else, then we talk about it afterwards, in terms of, she got to understand that I was struggling, and that, I needed to work out, how, a better balance, in terms of what we were doing with ourselves that would work for both of us. And I think it was odd. It was almost after we'd been through the most difficult things that I started to probably struggle more, from an emotional point of view.
Absolutely. And you can completely understand that, in that, you'd set yourself up, you'd gone through this time of this devastating news, watching how poorly Sarah was with the chemo, having the brain tumors, and how that affected her, her functioning, to being and caring for her and the children, and then being told, actually, this is the beginning of the end, with all the what we call preemptive medications in place in the house. So the medications that could be used in case of distress or, any kind of distressing symptoms during the time towards end of life. You've got that all set up. Like you said, you'd come to terms with it. I remember Sarah, she'd got, and yourself, I don't know whether actually you were involved in this. Sarah said that she'd made the videos for the children, for all their kind of key moments in their life that she felt that she wanted to still be able to be mum there despite her death. She was going to be there on film for them. When Georgina started her periods, and sex education, and all of those mum things that you want to do, and also all the birthday cards up until her 21st birthday. You got your head around this was it, and you'd planned your sort of seeing your future as being dad and kids, and suddenly that didn't look like that was happening anymore. So I completely understand how you'd kind of built yourself up and prepared yourself and in your mind dealt with it, to then suddenly this change. And also I can imagine that you felt guilty for feeling that, because, shouldn't you be jumping up and down with joy?
Yeah, it's really weird, because you can't help it, and it's not that you in no way you're wanting Sarah to die, but you kind of see your life after Sarah. You see it in your mind, you visualize what it's going to look like, and not in a good way. It's more in a really scary way, that God, how am I going to cope, kind of way, that you have to think about it, and almost how will I cope, what will I do? And actually some of the counselling I had helped with that, in terms of what it would look like, and them probably giving me a bit of support to say you'll be great, which was really nice, in terms of you've got through this so far, you will be okay. And yes, to have got into a headspace where, right, I understand what's going to happen. We have regular visits from the the St. Luke's people, etc. But then to Sarah to get better, it was really weird, because you were still, to some extent, you're making the most of everything, but at the same time you're kind of waiting for something to happen. There's all those things like signing the do not resuscitate things, etc., that you go through with the doctors, etc. All of that stuff had been done as well, even to the point of taking my son out to have a look at the potential burial plot where we go with Sarah, which he did in a Mario outfit. He wanted to. And it was really, it was really odd that actually that's not going to happen. It just felt like we spent so long building up towards that. And then as well, it's gradual, because it's 1 week, Sarah's doing okay. 2 weeks, but still something might happen in week 4 or week 5. You don't really know. So yes, you're still in that kind of state where for quite a while people have told you something's going to happen, the brain tumors will come back, and if they do, then they probably won't operate the next time round. And so you're in some ways you're waiting for that to happen. And then it doesn't, and you've got yourself ready for it, and it's all changed.
And absolutely, and also you've got the medics, the doctors, who, based on the information that they've got in front of them, and that and they know of the human body and how the tumors progress. You've got medics saying this is terminal, she is going to die. But Sarah's kind of not going along with that, is she? She's getting better, but there's no explanation for it in a medical sense, is there? Nobody's saying to you, actually, actually, I think this is regressing, and I think that this could be it. She's going to get better. Nobody could say that, because it was against the odds. in the medical terminology, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So you can't ever believe that she is going to actually get better.
Yeah, you can't. That's, and you do understand at certain points. I mean, I think earlier on in the journey, we thought, well, actually, a lot of the information that you get through about lung cancer, in terms of life expectancy, is based on averages. And you got initially a little bit of hope, because the averages are, a lot of people who get diagnosed are probably people who are in the 60s, maybe 70s, and maybe people who've smoked for most of their lives as well. And so I actually think, well, maybe there's a chance that Sarah's not that average, it's going to change. But then, so you did have a bit of hope initially, but then, with the brain tumors and the news that it's weeks, that took away that hope. It's if somebody's saying to you it's weeks, do what you need to prepare, then that's exactly what you did. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that was the conversation we had with Sarah, wasn't it? Very much based on how important hope and positivity and purpose. And she actually shared that the moment that she suddenly felt a release was when she felt she had that very honest conversation with the surgeon, Mr. Sinner, when she said, how long have I got? And he sat down and held her hand and said, do you want the truth? To which she said, yes, I'm ready. And he gave her that sort of 4 to 6. You're not going to see your next birthday, is what he said, wasn't it? You're not going to see your 38th birthday. And she said that she just felt like this, she sort of breathed out. It's as if she sort of breathed out all of that stress and felt like, okay, now been told the truth. As much, that was her turning point, and she found purpose in the time that she had left. Whereas for you, your purpose suddenly was like, what do I do here? I'm purposeful in caring for Sarah, but when she started to go against the odds, that purpose suddenly started to be lost. And you shared that before, how important, and we say this over and over again, how important it is for that sense of purpose. And Sarah went head first, or headlong, whatever the expression is, in setting up her transformational life coaching business and doing the course and having very good, strong boundaries. So she looked like this woman with a real strong purpose, but you felt a bit left behind and purposeless.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think just naturally, because because she had that diagnosis and because she's got over it, then obviously, anything that I can support Sarah with, and, things like setting up, a business, a life coaching, completely 100% support her with it. But yes, I think for me personally, I just didn't feel like I had that balance that I needed, in terms of, I'd lost the, somebody who's extremely ill, caring, responsibility, purpose. I remember I probably kept control sounds the wrong word, but in terms of like looking after her drugs, making sure that she took them at the right time, I probably kept hold of that job far longer than I needed to, because it was something that I could do, and it was part of what I did for Sarah. And it took a little bit of time for me to let go of that, and it took a bit of time as well to be able to talk to Sarah and say, well, okay, but what about me? And can we, how are we going to make this work for us both? And what can we do? And, in terms of, which friends you'd see, what you'd do at weekends, whether or not we felt brave enough to plan any, going away, for a week or two, etc. All those kinds of things. It seems if, can we get, and just saying that, just I think explaining how important to me those kinds of things were, and that I needed them, and that it had to be that kind of balance in terms of these are the things I think I need. We don't need to be in that kind of mode of like support and care in the same kinds of way. But yeah, it just took quite a while for me to work out, what that was in terms of that loss of purpose, but also just what I needed as well. I couldn't articulate it. I just felt frustrated that, I didn't have this purpose, and that I was still, supporting Sarah in terms of, life coaching and other things that we wanted to do. And yeah, it took quite a while to get there for me. But the counselling did help. And as I said before, I think just Sarah knowing that I was having the counselling and that meant that I was struggling with things and that I needed that support helped. And it helped us to talk about it as well, in terms of how we're both feeling, and more of a, rather than, I think, throughout a lot of the period, it would have much more been me talking to Sarah about how she's feeling, what she felt she could do, and what we were going to plan, etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually getting it to be, a bit more of a balance in terms of, right, what do we both need, and how we're going to, how we're going to live as a family, move forward, which should be a really good thing, and it is. Things are really, really good now, but it just took a bit of time to get there.
Absolutely, and like you so articulately put across the benefits of counselling through these kind of situations when there is so much going on in your mind, isn't there? And yes, you can speak to friends, yes, you can speak to family, yes, you can speak to Sarah, but you can't have that real objective person that's there supporting you for your needs. You feel guilty or bad expressing your needs, because goodness me, Sarah's going through so much. I should be able to, and you sort of feel as though you should be able to cope, but actually really identifying that your needs are just as important, and to keep you well is so important. And then also this journey that you're going on together to keep the two of you, in this sort of on that same path, or it's a completely different path, isn't it? So well done for tapping into that, because it feels difficult. It feels difficult to go down there, doesn't it? It feels like you're giving in, or you're not, but I think counselling is amazing for anybody to go work through a difficult situation, and to help you to identify the needs that you have.
Yeah, because it was something that I was offered earlier on in our journey. So at the start, we went along to the local cancer charity, Cavendish Cancer Care, and I was offered counselling at that time, but I think for me personally, it was too soon. I didn't really know what I wanted to talk to them about. So I think that's one of the things I'd reflect on as well, is that it's when it's right for you and when you need it. I think right at the very start, it was too soon. I didn't really know what I'd want to talk about. I didn't really need to talk to them about, the news and diagnosis that we've got, etc. I know that other family members did, and they got a lot out of it at that time. But I was really lucky that, the support was there. I was offered the counselling really early on. But for me personally, yeah, it was much further down the line when, after probably the most difficult stuff had happened, in terms of, some of the really difficult treatments that Sarah had had. The chemo was really, really difficult, and the heart problems as well. And yes, and with the brain tumours as well, that was really, really difficult as well, because, in some ways it changed Sarah's personality for a short while. She had so much inflammation on her brain, so she became quite irrational, quite agitated, quite difficult to be with. So at those kinds of times, it was just, let's just keep going. I think a lot of the time just just keep the show on the road, keep the kids going, get them into school, do what we need to do for Sarah, and keep work going as well.
You go into that survival mode, don't you? Absolutely. And then it's kind of like it therefore doesn't surprise me, and I'm sure the same with you, that actually when it hit you was when you could actually start to relax and have time, because actually Sarah was getting better, and then it's kind of smacked you around the head and gone, what on earth has just happened to our sort of life dream. Thank you so much, Adam. I'm aware of time, and I just wondered if sort of to finish with, whether obviously we'll have lots of different people listening to this your story, and people going on their own journeys, being supporters of husbands, wives, children, mums, dads, you name it, friends. And is there anything that you would kind of advise or kind of share with people as to what would be your sort of top tips in managing the supporting role as of somebody with cancer?
Probably a few things. I think there's definitely something about gratefully receiving all the support that you can get. There's absolutely no need to try and do everything yourself. It's really, really lucky. We had a fab support network around us, in terms of friends and family, and they all wanted to do something to support us, and taking them up on that and not trying to be a bit of a martyr and trying to do everything yourself. I think that was really important. Getting people to cook us meals, drop things off on the doorstep. It's really nice. You'd get different food dropped off occasionally, people looking after us, and it helped because it just make you feel really loved as well. So I think definitely take advantage of all the support that you can that's around you. People, and it's partly for them as well. People want to support you, and that makes them feel useful, but you can also take advantage yourself. I think I didn't always do it, but I think when I did, I really, really saw the benefits of it. I think the other thing as well is being a team. I think when Sarah's interview, she talked a lot about hope and a lot about being quite proactive in terms of, looking at not alternative treatments, but looking at, how we could make the best of this in terms of, looking at diet, looking at different supplements that could take and things like that. And I think being a team on that. So, both of us reading, any research or any books on this kind of stuff, both of us reading it, understanding it, getting the ideas, because quite often it gives both of you hope. You feel like you're contributing then. And quite often as well, Sarah wouldn't be able to do the things that she wanted to. She, in terms of like trying to get 12, portions of fruit and veg into, or whatever it might be. And actually, but that was really important. So that'd be something that I'd support her with. So I'd do lots of juicing, make sure that I ordered, any additional supplements and things like that. And it gave me a bit of purpose in terms of helping. But also when Sarah wasn't well enough to do that herself, I was able to, make sure that we kept that going, that side of it. And that was quite important as well, that we were just both on the same page with a lot of things, that we act as a team, that we talked about these kinds of things, rather than it being Sarah's like initiative or something that we both understood and got on board with. And yeah, I think all the support, and just speaking to the charities as well about the things that are available. So there was counselling for the kids, which really, really helped, and not necessarily something you initially think about, but speaking to them about what you're going through and understanding the different support that they could provide was really, really important. And also we did get a fair bit of support in terms of the financial side, so understanding which benefits you can access, and all that kind of stuff as well. I mean, I probably could read a lot of it and understand it myself, but there are charities out there, there are people who can support you, and it makes a big difference as well. Being able to understand what the financial support is, get that stuff set up, nice and early, really, really helped. Just made, it's just one less thing to worry about. So yeah, I think probably those are some of the things, as beyond what we've been talking about.
Amazing. I mean, they're all really helpful, practical tips for anyone, aren't they? And like you said, that importance of being a team. And I remember Sarah saying her dad, I think, liked to read a bit about the research as well. And because there's so much out there, isn't there? There's so much out there. It's a big minefield, and you want to feel like you've got an element of control. And doing the lifestyle things that brings you back into control, doesn't it? And there's so much out there that can help, like you said, the diet and exercise and relaxation, all of those things. So well done you for being on board with that and being part of that team, which will without a doubt have made a big difference in her health journey. Just one final question from me is, what positives do you see that this journey has brought to you and Sarah and your family?
Although there's probably quite a few. I mean, I think in terms of family and friends and support, that probably had some fantastic experiences. We're really lucky where we felt really loved, like gestures from different people, and that type, that you wouldn't have experienced that otherwise. So that kind of outpouring of love and support from friends, family, was fantastic. It brought quite a few of us a lot closer together than we would have otherwise been. I think as a family, it changes things, but it brought us all closer together. That we've been through this. The kids, they've had to in some ways grow up quite a lot during this period. In terms of what we've talked to them about. In terms of death, etc. But being open and honest with them, and speaking to them at the right level rather than keeping things from them. I think that's probably changed. It's tricky because they're developing and growing up all the time, but I think we're all really open and honest with one another, and do see ourselves as quite a close-knit team, probably more so than we would have been otherwise. And I think for me and Sarah as well, it's obviously absolutely love her, and she's fab, as you've seen from her interview, and I think, yes, it brings you, it's just the different experiences that you have, both good and bad. It's almost like, it's like the volume's been turned up a lot, everything becomes that much more intense, in terms of your experiences, and both the difficult ones, but the really good ones as well. Everything is a lot more tense, we've intensed, it's in a really good way. We've been through a lot, we've felt a lot, we've cried and we've laughed a lot throughout it. And, you wouldn't have had those kind of really close experiences otherwise. So, yeah, there are definitely, a lot of memories in there that are good as well.
That's just amazing, Adam. And to have that positive slant on things, and it just makes you look at things through a very different lens, doesn't it? So thank you so much for giving us your time today. You've done really well, and I can imagine the emotions that's probably brought up. And you've been an inspiration to me, certainly, and all of our listeners. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy, for conducting such a beautiful interview. Thank you, Adam, for sharing so honestly and openly about such a difficult subject. I'm definitely taking away once again that through difficulties we can become a much more close-knit unit with our friends and family, employees, employers. We're all human, and I think we can apply it quite globally, this principle, to take away from today the love, the joy, and the positivity that you both harnessed, like we did from our last session. Thank you so much for joining us. Everybody who has come on Zoom session, we will be having our usual 20-30 minute chat just after. If you have joined us on YouTube, well, we're going to say goodbye to you tonight, and we hope to see you next Sunday. If you are enjoying our talks and you find them useful, please hit the subscribe button to support our work. Say hello on our social media, because we love to hear from you on Instagram, Facebook, and also on LinkedIn. And you can find us on our website at heroofhealth.com and become a member free of charge to have the peer-to-peer support that you need to become a hero of your own health. Thank you once again, and we hope to see you next Sunday. Bye, everyone.